Our story today begins on a lonely frontier many winters ago, where snow lay deep and endless across the land. Imagine yourself there, a wide wilderness stretching to every horizon. Relax. Let your body sink into stillness now. Feel the quiet around you, as though the room itself is holding you in calm and safety. Each breath you take flows in gently, then drifts back out, carrying away the day's noise, carrying away tension. Notice how your eyelids grow heavy, how the muscles of your face soften, how your shoulders release. With every breath, you are more at peace, and with every heartbeat, you are more ready to drift into a soothing story. There is no rush, no demand, only a gentle rhythm, only the quiet comfort of listening. The air is sharp, cool, crisp against the skin, but there is beauty in it too. A blanket of white silence, broken only by the whisper of wind and the slow groan of trees bending beneath their coats of snow. The world is hushed, as though it too has fallen into sleep. A small wooden cabin stands on the edge of a clearing, its roof sagging beneath the weight of ice, its chimney sending up only the faintest coil of smoke. Inside, the walls creak and sigh as the cold presses close, but there is a dim glow of firelight, a fragile comfort against the vast and frozen night. It is here that a family, weary but steadfast, struggles to hold on through the brutal truth of winter survival. Picture the hearth, where flames crackle softly, shadows dancing on rough-hewn logs. The warmth is precious, scarce, like a treasure to be guarded. Around it, blankets and old quilts are wrapped tightly around shivering shoulders. Supplies are low. Every bite of dried meat, every spoonful of beans, is counted carefully, stretched to last another day. Outside, the snow has trapped them in, door nearly frozen shut, windows frosted over with delicate crystal patterns that catch the firelight. The father rises, his breath visible even in the cabin's thin warmth. He pushes against the heavy door, and a rush of icy air slips in, curling through the room. The dog stirs from where it lies near the hearth, tail thumping once before settling back, conserving strength. The silence of the world outside feels almost endless, broken only by the faint howl of a distant wolf. The man gathers his coat close, pulls his hat low, and steps into the white wilderness, each step crunching underfoot, muffled, as though the snow swallows sound. The sky is pale gray, the sun little more than a ghost, behind thick clouds. He walks slowly, every movement heavy, but his mind is steady. He must check the traps, must find something to bring back. The snow rises almost to his knees, each step dragging, each breath burning cold in his lungs. He thinks of the children, their thin faces pressed close to their mother's side, and it gives him strength. Inside the cabin, time drifts like the snow outside, slow, endless, quiet. The mother tends the fire, her hands red and raw from the cold, her eyes watchful, alert. She listens to the wind, to the creak of the roof, to the soft rustle of her children shifting in their sleep. Every sound is magnified in such silence, every crack in the wood, every sigh of the fire. She closes her eyes for a moment, imagining spring, green fields, warm sun, rivers rushing free again. But then she opens them and sees only the frost, only the endless white pressing close, and she knows they must endure. The children whisper softly beneath their quilts, their voices hushed as though afraid to disturb the snow itself. They speak of dreams, of summer hunts, of bright berries in the forest. Their words are like fragile sparks against the heavy cold. The mother smiles faintly, though her heart aches with worry. She strokes their hair, murmuring softly, her voice like a lullaby. Rest, little ones. We are strong. We will see the thaw. Close your eyes. Dream of warmth. As night deepens, the father returns, weary and frostbitten, but with a rabbit caught in his trap. It is not much, but it is something. A small victory against the hunger gnawing at them all. The cabin fills with the faint smell of cooking, thin broth simmering slowly, steam curling like ghostly fingers in the dim light. They eat quietly, every mouthful cherished, and afterward they sit in silence, listening to the fire's gentle crackle, each lost in thought, in memory, in hope. Outside, snow falls again, soft and endless. The wind sighs through the trees, rattles the shutters, moans across the chimney. Yet inside, there is stillness, fragile but real. The children drift into slumber, their breathing deep and even. The mother's eyes grow heavy, head resting against the wooden wall. The father stares into the fire, watching the coals glow and dim, as though the world itself breathes in slow rhythm. And so the night stretches on, long and silent, the family cocooned in their tiny cabin, holding on to warmth, holding on to hope. The snow may trap them, the cold may bite, but they are together, and in togetherness there is strength. Imagine yourself now in that cabin. Feel the fire's glow upon your face, the faint smell of wood smoke in the air. Hear the soft rise and fall of wind beyond the walls, the quiet rustle of quilts, the gentle breathing of those beside you. Let the rhythm of it soothe you, slow your heart, ease your mind. Let the stillness of winter surround you, not as a burden, but as a blanket, wrapping you close, holding you safe. And as you breathe slowly, deeply, you find your own thoughts drifting, like snowflakes on the air, settling softly, quietly, into peace. Our story drifts onward, and the night has deepened. Outside, the wind howls more fiercely now, swirling flurries against the walls, rattling the door as though some restless spirit knocks to be let in. But the family stays close to the fire, wrapped in silence, in the kind of stillness that only the harshest winters bring. Their breath mingles with the smoke, a reminder of life persisting even in the grip of the storm. The father's hands ache as he rubs them slowly before the flames, his skin cracked and raw from the cold. He does not speak much, but his eyes are steady, always calculating, always listening. He hears the groan of the timbers as the wind presses against them, hears the faint shifting of snow piling against the door. In his heart, he knows they must remain vigilant. A cabin can be a sanctuary, but it can also become a tomb if the snow buries it too deep. The mother stirs, rising from her blanket. She moves with a quiet grace, her steps soft upon the wooden floor. She checks the pot, stirs the broth, though there is little left within. She touches her children's foreheads, feels their warmth, reassured by their steady breathing. Her voice is soft as falling snow when she whispers to them, "Sleep well, little ones. The storm will pass." They do not stir, lost in dreams, their faces peaceful despite the hunger in their bellies. Hours pass, measured only by the shifting shadows on the wall, by the way the flames climb and fall. The storm outside rages, but within, time moves like a slow river, each moment stretching into the next, unbroken, endless. At last, dawn arrives, though the light is weak and dim, little more than a gray glow through the frost-glazed windows. The father pushes open the door, straining against the snow pressed heavy against it, and steps out into a world remade. The storm has buried the land deeper still, drifts reaching up past the fences, swallowing the path, muffling every sound. He pauses, breath clouding the air, his eyes scanning the horizon. The forest is a cathedral of silence now. Branches droop with a white weight, the trees bending as though bowing to the endless cold. The air is sharp, biting but clean, each breath cut and yet refreshing. He trudges onward, following a trail only he can see, a path worn into memory. His traps are hidden beneath the snow, but he knows where to dig, where to reach. He finds little, one trap empty, another frozen solid, a third snapped with nothing inside. His heart sinks, though he does not let despair take root. And then, at the fourth movement, a rabbit, small and trembling, caught but alive. He whispers softly, as though speaking to the forest itself, thanking it for this small mercy. He ends the creature's suffering quickly, and with reverence, places it in his pack. It is not much, but it is something. Back in the cabin, the children stir as the door opens, their eyes bright despite the dim light. "Did you bring anything, Papa?" one asks, voice hushed but hopeful. The father nods, showing them the small prize. Their smiles are fragile but real, like tiny blossoms daring to bloom against the frost. The mother cooks carefully, stretching what little they have. The smell fills the cabin, rich and comforting despite its thinness. They gather close, hands cupped around the bowls, steam rising to warm their faces. They eat slowly, savoring each bite, as though to make the moment last longer. Hunger is still there, deep and aching, but for now, it is quieted. And as they eat, the father begins to tell a story. His voice is rough, deep, but steady, weaving old tales of the frontier, of explorers who braved even harsher winters, of hunters who found food where none thought possible, of settlers who endured storms so fierce that the sky itself seemed to vanish. The children listen with wide eyes, their hunger forgotten for a moment, their imaginations painting bright pictures against the gray cabin walls. The mother listens too, her heart easing at the sound of her husband's voice. She leans back, closing her eyes, letting the tale carry her. In stories there is warmth, there is hope, there is the promise that endurance leads to survival. The crackling fire joins in, as though adding its voice to the tale, a soft percussion beneath the father's words. The day drifts on, hours blurring. The children doze again, bellies warm for now, cheeks flushed with a faint glow. The mother sits quietly, her sewing set aside, her gaze lingering on the snow-smeared window. The father sharpens his knife, the sound steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Time becomes dreamlike, each moment blending with the next, like snowflakes dissolving on warm skin. Outside, the wind begins to ease. The storm lessens, its voice growing softer, gentler, until only a faint whisper remains. The silence returns, heavy but calm. The land lies still again, endless white stretching beneath the weak winter sun. Inside the cabin, peace settles too. The fire burns low, casting a warm glow. The children sigh in their sleep, safe for now, their faces serene. The parents sit close, their hands brushing together, sharing a quiet strength. They know more storms will come, more trials will test them. But in this moment, they have warmth, they have shelter, they have one another. And as you imagine this scene, let yourself drift deeper into calm. Feel the rhythm of the father's steady words, the mother's quiet presence, the children's gentle breathing. Hear the fading wind, the hushed forest, the crackle of a fire. Let it lull you, as though you too are within that cabin, wrapped in safety, sheltered against the storm. Each breath you take draws you deeper into rest. Each heartbeat carries you further into peace. And so the winter dragged on, a slow-moving tide of white and silence. By the second month, the days had melted into one another indistinguishable, like pages in a book left out in the snow, edges curling from damp. Caleb marked time not by dates, but by the dwindling supplies, by the shifting hue of the sky beyond the frost-clouded windows. The logs they had gathered in autumn now formed neat skeletal stacks inside, diminishing with each night's fire. He rationed them carefully, calculating which nights could be spent in relative warmth, and which must be endured with only embers glowing faintly in the hearth. It was a brutal arithmetic, one that did not forgive miscalculations. Emma, ever resourceful, had begun to sew together scraps of old fabric to make thicker coverings. Each stitch was deliberate, a quiet act of defiance against the creeping cold. Caleb would watch her sometimes, the needle glinting faintly in the dim light, her breath fogging as she hummed softly under her breath. There was no melody, just a thread of sound to anchor them in a world that had otherwise fallen silent. Outside, the snow continued its slow siege. The forest, once a source of food and firewood, was now a maze of whitened trunks and snowdrifts that swallowed paths whole. Wolves howled in the distance, not close, but not far enough to ignore. Caleb kept the rifle nearby, its cold metal a reassurance, though he knew that if it came to that, they were already in trouble. One morning, a crack echoed through the valley. It was not the sound of ice breaking on the river, nor a tree splitting under the weight of snow. It was something deeper, a shift in the frozen earth itself. Caleb felt it through the floorboards, a low tremor that rattled the glass jars on the shelves. Emma looked up, eyes wide, but neither spoke. Some things were better left unacknowledged. As days passed, they began to speak less, not out of anger or resentment, but because silence demanded less energy. Every word was an exertion, every conversation a reminder of how long they had been trapped. They communicated through glances, through the passing of a mug, the tug of a blanket, the shared weight of their survival. Then, one night, the wind changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in direction, carrying with it a faint scent of something other than ice and wood smoke. Caleb sat up from his bedroll, heart quickening. He stood, padding softly to the door, pressing his ear to the wood. The wind carried the whisper of running water, faint but unmistakable. He turned to Emma, who was already awake, her eyes reflecting the faint firelight. "It's melting," he whispered. And in that moment, something inside them both uncoiled, a tension they hadn't realized they'd been carrying. But the thaw would not come quickly. Winter still had its claws deep in the land, and the storm that came next was the worst yet. The wind howled with a ferocity that made the cabin shudder. Snow found its way through every crack and seam, stinging skin and stealing warmth. Caleb and Emma huddled together beneath every blanket they owned, the fire blazing as high as it dared, logs sacrificed without count. Time became elastic in the storm. Hours stretched, minutes folded back on themselves. Caleb found himself drifting into memories of green fields and sunlight, of voices calling across a summer meadow. Emma's hand in his grounded him, a tether in the whiteout. At some point, he didn't know when, the storm passed. The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the trees groaned. It was as if the world had been erased, wiped clean by the wind's fury. Caleb opened the door cautiously, blinking against the light. The snow had sculpted the landscape into strange, alien shapes, drifts taller than a man, icicles like spears hanging from the eaves. And there, in the distance, the black thread of a river, cutting through the white. It moved sluggishly, a snake awakening from hibernation. But it moved. Caleb and Emma stepped outside together, their boots sinking into the deep snow. The air was sharp and clean, filling their lungs with a kind of painful clarity. They stood there for a long moment, just breathing, watching the river flow. It was not the end of winter, not yet, but it was a sign. And in the wilderness, signs were everything. The days that followed were hard, but different. There was purpose again. Caleb set traps along the river, checking them each morning. Emma found patches where the snow had melted just enough to reveal dormant plants, signs of green life biding its time. They spoke more, too. Not much, but enough. Plans for when the thaw came fully. Dreams of what they would do once the path to town opened again. Caleb would rebuild the fence around the cabin. Emma wanted to plant a garden. At night, they still huddled together, still fed the fire carefully, still listened to the wind. But now, they also listened to the drip of water from the eaves, to the creak of thawing wood, to the distant call of a bird returned too soon. Each sound was a promise, and when the first true day of spring arrived, the day when the snow finally gave way to mud and grass, when the air smelled of earth instead of ice, Caleb and Emma stood outside their cabin, hands clasped, and let the sun touch their faces. They had survived the snow. They had been trapped, but they had not been broken, and in that quiet victory, under a sky no longer white but blue, they found the strength to keep going. Because in the end, survival was not about defeating the cold. It was about enduring it together. The crust of ice that once coated the river now drifts away in broken shards, each one catching the weak sunlight like fragments of glass. The air grows different too, lighter, easier, filled with the faintest hint of soil beneath the melt. It is not yet warm, but it carries a promise. Inside the cabin, the mood changes with the weather. Where once every sound was a warning, now each sound feels like an offering. The drip from the roof is a metronome of relief. The creak of the walls is no longer a groan of strain, but the body of the cabin stretching, loosening after months of tension. Caleb finds himself lingering by the window more often, simply watching the slow unraveling of winter. Emma hums again as she works, this time with a trace of melody returning. The tune, like the first bird, daring to sing against the silence. They begin to move differently, too. Their steps lighter, shoulders less bowed by the weight of fear. The tasks remain endless. Wood to be chopped, traps to be checked, clothing to be mended. But the heaviness that once clung to these actions has eased. Now each chore feels like a step toward living, not merely surviving. Caleb sharpens the axe with patient strokes, the rasping sound steady and soothing, while Emma kneads dough from the last of their flour, hands strong and certain. The smell of baking bread filling the room with warmth deeper than the fire. When night comes, it is still cold, but no longer unbearable. The fire glows without the frantic need to burn high. They sit close, listening not just to the crackle of flames, but to the quiet between. That quiet no longer feels hollow. It feels full, carrying the echoes of what they've endured and the hope of what is to come. Caleb sometimes tells small stories from memory, his childhood running through tall grass, his father's lessons about the land. Emma shares dreams of planting rows of herbs, of dyeing cloth with blossoms, of a table heavy with summer's bounty. Their voices are soft, lulling, weaving together a tapestry of possibilities. One morning, Caleb wakes to a sound he has almost forgotten. Bird song. Thin and reedy, it pierces the air outside the cabin. He sits up slowly, hardly daring to believe, and when Emma stirs, he motions for her to listen. Her eyes widen, and then she smiles. A small, tired, but radiant smile. They open the door together and step out into the chill. The world is still mostly white, but in the distance, small patches of brown earth peek through, raw and honest. A bird perches on a bare branch, feathers ruffled, voice trembling but insistent. It is a fragile thing, yet it feels immense. The days that follow bring more signs. The river runs freer. The snow recedes from the base of trees, leaving dark circles where roots breathe again. Tracks appear in the thawing ground, deer, perhaps, or fox, proof that life has endured beyond their walls. Each discovery feels like a gift placed quietly in their path. Caleb and Emma begin to venture farther, cautious but eager. They gather what they can, and though their hands remain cold, their spirits warm with every step. At night, as the wind softens, Caleb finds himself reflecting on the journey they've survived. He remembers the silence, the storms, the gnaw of hunger, the way the cold seeped into bone and thought alike. Yet he also remembers the steadfastness of Emma's hands, the glow of the fire, the way their hearts synchronized in the stillness. Survival was not just endurance, it was communion, a shared rhythm between them and the land, between them and each other. And so, when he finally says aloud, "We made it," it is not just a statement of fact, it is a benediction. Emma nods, her gaze steady, her breath visible in the air. "We did," she replies, voice as soft as falling snow. The story of their survival is not written in grand gestures or heroic acts. It is written in the quiet persistence of each day, in the decision to keep going when the night seemed endless, in the small kindnesses shared between two souls, bound together against the cold. As spring's light grows stronger, they understand that the winter will always remain as a part of them. The memory of it lingers like frost in the heart, a reminder of how close the silence can come to swallowing sound. But it also sharpens the sweetness of every thaw, every bird call, every breath of warm air. And so, when the first true bloom appears on the forest's edge, a shy, trembling flower pushing through half-frozen soil, Emma kneels beside it, fingertips brushing the petals as though touching something sacred. Caleb watches her, his chest tight with a quiet awe. In that small bloom, they see everything: endurance, fragility, beauty, and the promise that even after the longest winter, life returns. Their story is not only one of being trapped in the snow, it is one of finding warmth in silence, of weaving strength out of each other's presence, of learning that survival is not simply about waiting for the cold to end, but about carrying light within the dark. And as you listen now, feeling your own breath slowing, your body softening into stillness, let yourself drift deeper into that same quiet knowing that no matter how long or heavy the winters of life may seem, there is always the soft return of spring waiting patiently to meet you. Sleep now, safe in that thought, safe in the knowledge that you too endure, and that warmth always finds its way back.